So, Little Town Hero has been one of those titles with a big question mark next to it leading up to its release. We've seen it a few times during like Nintendo Directs and that, and many still aren't even sure what type of game it is or what it's about. And now that it's here, it's getting a mixed reception with a lot of heat coming from the Pokemon fans in particular, who feel that Game Freak essentially wasted resources that could have been used on Pokemon on this game. So what's the deal? Well, let's talk about it. We'll start with the gameplay, combat in particular, because that's where I feel people are running into the most problems and where a lot of the debate is stemming from. I see a lot of people saying it's too hard, too complicated, and others being like, oh, you dumb casual, it's so easy. As with most things, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. I think the big issue players are going to have with this game is approaching it with the RPG mindset. And I'd even go as far to blame the game partially in terms of its presentation with the combat, because it does look very RPG-esque. Looks like you're playing a turn-based RPG here. But no, this is really more of a card game, albeit a card game with no deck building. You need to think of these moves, your attacks, more like minions. You get a set amount of power each turn, which keeps going up as the battle rages on, and have to decide how to best use it by activating these skills as they start in a dormant state, which the game calls an Is-It, and then once you activate them, they become a Does-It. Let me note here that the naming is completely stupid and doesn't help alleviate any of the confusion. But yeah, once activated, each one has an attack value and a defense value. Attack value will take away that amount from an opponent's defense value, and your goal is to break your adversary's Does-Its by the end of the turn and hit them once more to take away one of their hearts. Once an enemy's hearts are depleted, you win the battle. If your hearts are depleted, you lose. Simple enough, but it can get very complicated with how, different abilities work together, combo off each other, which that's something I'd say everyone needs to keep in mind if you're playing this game, is not being in a rush to play your hand. Anyone who plays card games will tell you the same. Every turn you should be really sitting back, thinking about all the moves you have at your disposal, how they work with other abilities, and then proceed to play. Because by activating one, you may be able to give a buff to another active skill, but if you don't have any other abilities active, you just wasted combo potential. It takes a while to get used to for sure, and enemies will force you to learn quickly. I will definitely say the battles in this game are no joke, and it does throw a lot at you early on and ramps up quickly as you get further into the game. You'll certainly have to maximize your potential to get through some of those tougher fights, believe me. Which this may sound good on paper for some, but I do have a lot of problems with it. While I don't think the actual combat system is bad or even really that confusing, I think, again, if you play card games, you'll catch on really quick, might even say it's pretty simple. I'd say the presentation, the way the UI is displayed in that, is terrible. I get it's all going for an RPG look, but that's not the way the game plays. They should have laid it all out more like a card game and not like this wheel and these different menus you have to go through and that. I think the interface could have used a lot of work, not to mention the fact that just the visualization of it, I think the icons in that look very mobile game-esque, very cheap. Like I mentioned, it's really a card game with no deck building. You don't choose what's available to you, it's all just randomly assigned to you. You do have this pool of abilities to choose from in your headspace that is essentially your deck. Again, you don't pick the actual abilities that are in there, but you can swap them out with the ones in your hand at a cost of battle points, which are hard to come by, so don't expect to do that very frequently. But yeah, it feels like there's a lot of randomness. For instance, every fight is essentially a boss fight. Rarely will you have a fight that lasts, say, less than 10 turns. And they all have different moves and abilities of their own. So while you may get more familiar with your kit as you progress through the game, defeating one enemy doesn't really make you that prepared for the next one. You do sort of level up. There are these Eureka points you get by completing side quests or by completing a battle, and you can spend them to power up your different abilities, so you do get stronger as you go through the game. But strategy-wise, there is little to do to prepare, I would say, for different enemy encounters. There's also, wow, this does sound like a lot when I'm explaining it. There's like a grid system where between turns you move around a map, and there will be different spaces that have different things you can do on them, like, use a cannon against the enemy if you have the right ability, or have a townsperson give you a buff. And while there are some skills that let you pick where you move during this segment, this is also kind of random as you essentially dice roll to decide where you'll go. When you factor in the randomness with every fight being extremely different, I think the game leans a bit heavy on trial and error. I think on average, people for most battles will end up needing to play one round to see what the enemy does and what's at your disposal in the environment before making your first real attempt. And let me be clear, I'm not trying to say like, oh, it's all random, your strategy doesn't matter. Just having so much unknown going into each fight can be a bit excessive. Like, yeah, with boss fights typically in games, you want them to be very tough, very different. But when most of your fights are pretty much boss fights, yeah, it can be a bit much. Which I think they may have done to kind of pad the playtime. Which, the game is also very much on the shorter side. Depending on your skill with this type of gameplay and how quickly you catch on, I'd say you could get anywhere between 12 and 20 hours out of it. Again, it's hard to judge because it relies heavily on how well you grasp the concept. Some of these battles can go on for like 30 minutes. So if you have to keep retrying, that time will really add up. And it's also pretty heavily padded with a good amount of, go over here, click this, then go over there and click that. In fact, that's how most of the side quests go. You're just running around, clicking on random NPCs. Probably, honestly, some of the lamest side quests I've ever played in a game. So yeah, if you catch on to the battle system, you can really breeze through this thing pretty quickly. And that's why it feels so weird, just off to me. I get the idea the team pitched, okay, is they wanted something that was an RPG for people with limited time. Something that wasn't as lengthy, but felt rewarding to progress through. Which I think that is a solid goal to have. I talk often about how these RPGs are often so many times such a huge time investment, it's hard for people to play very many of them. But I think they completely missed the mark here. Because with everything that's going on in this game, you really need to stick with it. Like, when I think of a person with limited time, they may be able to play an hour here or an hour there, maybe days or even a week or more between play sessions. And with a game like this, you're going to forget how to play the game. Again, there's so many abilities and the way they combo and stuff. If you're taking huge breaks from it, you're going to forget what to do. And on top of that, if you stick with it, it feels like once you really find yourself mastering the mechanics, the game's over, or at least almost over. So because of this odd gameplay structure, it's hard for me to recommend this to many people at all. Again, if you're looking for something to play casually, I definitely don't think this is a good game for you. I think you're going to play it once or twice, then come back after a while for a third play session, realize you don't remember how to play, and then quit. And for someone who loves getting deep into these strategic games, there also isn't going to be enough for you here to find it worth your time. The other elements of the game I felt were actually pretty good. I really like the art direction, the look of the world, despite it also being very small in scope. You can run around the whole thing in like a couple minutes. There's some sweet enemy designs, but again, there's only a few of them. The music is probably the highlight. They got Toby Fox from Undertale fame to compose music for this title, which now after playing this game, I see why in the last Nintendo Direct they put so much focus on that, the music and the fact that Toby Fox was doing it, because they probably didn't want to get into much of anything else. The story's okay, charming, I'd say for sure. There's some fun dialogue, funny moments, but overall the narrative doesn't have much to it either. It all really just feels underdeveloped. Like, there's no problem, okay, having a shorter game, and I get that's the goal, and they definitely charge the right price for a smaller game. It's $25, but in many ways it feels more like a piece of a bigger game. So will this go down as a waste of resources from Game Freak? I think it probably will, honestly. I'd also note, though, that that doesn't necessarily mean it was like time and money that would have directly gone into Pokemon Sword and Shield or anything. And I definitely don't think people should be review bombing the game or anything over it. Once more, when I see like, oh, 0 out of 10, 1 out of 10. Okay, even if the game is bad, it's not that bad. but I definitely don't see it doing very well, especially with it being released right in the middle of this jam-packed holiday season. Like, I would say the game is pretty just mediocre. I don't think it's really that bad, or it's not great, but there are going to be way too many great games released around it for many to even bother with it. Anyway, with that, this video's a wrap. Let me know your thoughts on Little Town Hero in the comments. Are you currently playing the game? And do you feel like it was a waste of resources? Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this discussion of Little Town Hero. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. And if you want to keep the conversation going, hit me up on Twitter, @JohnnyZakari. And join my Discord, ChiGuy and Friends. Link to both in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching.